The smoke in the cantina was thick enough to choke a Vorthan whale. Vexthera sat in the corner booth, her massive frame making the reinforced seat creak with every small movement. The reptilian hunter's scales caught the dim light, creating a pattern of shadows across her scarred hide. 3 eyes tracked every movement in the crowded room while her 4th eye, the one that could see heat signatures, stayed focused on the entrance. She was waiting. She was always waiting. The cantina buzzed with the usual mix of traders, smugglers, and bounty hunters from across the galaxy. Most gave Vexthera a wide space. They knew who she was. Everyone in this part of the galaxy knew who she was. Vexthera the Relentless. The hunter who never failed. The predator who had brought in over 300 targets without losing a single one. Her success rate was perfect, and in the bounty hunting business, that kind of record made you either very rich or very dead. She was very rich. The Stek hunter lifted her drink to her mouth. The liquid burned as it went down, but she barely noticed. Her kind had evolved on a world where the water itself could melt flesh. This stuff was like fruit juice compared to home. Another round. The bartender was a small, furry creature from the outer rim. His species was known for being polite and keeping their mouths shut about customer business. That made him perfect for a place like this. No. Vexithara's voice came out as a low hiss. Her translator picked it up and converted it to standard galactic, but it still sounded like a threat. Everything she said sounded like a threat. The bartender nodded quickly and moved away. Vexithara went back to watching the room. Her heat-sensing eye picked up elevated body temperatures near the bar. Someone was nervous. Someone was scared. In her line of work, that usually meant business was coming her way. She was right. Vexthara. The voice belonged to Zekron, a blue-skinned Alterian who ran one of the larger bounty broker services in this sector. He was thin where she was massive, smooth where she was scarred. His people were known for being smart and careful. Hers were known for being deadly. Zekron. She didn't look at him as he slid into the booth across from her. Her main eyes stayed on the room while her heat eye focused on him. His body temperature was higher than normal. He was nervous about something. "I have a job for you," he said, placing a data pad on the table between them. "High-value target." "Very high value." Vexithera finally looked at him with all 4 eyes. "How high?" 2 million credits, that got her attention. 2 million was serious money, even for someone with her reputation. She reached for the data pad, but Zekron's hand shot out to stop her. "There's something you should know first," he said. His voice was quieter now, almost a whisper. "The target is human." Vexithara's hand stopped moving toward the pad. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the cantina continued its usual noise, but their corner had become an island of silence. "No," she said finally. Zekron blinked in confusion. In all the years he had known Vexithara, she had never turned down a job, never. "What do you mean, no? You haven't even looked at the details yet." "I don't need to." Vexithara leaned back in her seat, making it creak again. "I don't hunt humans, but this is 2 million credits. Do you know what you could do with that kind of money?" "Buy a lot of things. None of them worth hunting a human." Zekron stared at her like she had grown a 5th eye. "I don't understand. Since when do you turn down jobs? Since when do you care what species the target is?" "Since 3 years ago." 3 years? Zekron's voice rose, then he caught himself and lowered it again. "What happened 3 years ago?" Vexithara was quiet for so long that Zekron thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was even quieter than before. "I learned something." "What did you learn?" "That some things are too dangerous to hunt." Zekron laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "Too dangerous?" "You're Vexithara the Relentless. You've hunted war criminals, escaped prisoners, terrorist leaders. You brought in Kethrak the Destroyer alive when everyone said it was impossible. What could possibly be too dangerous for you?" Vexithara stood up. Her full height made even the other large species in the cantina look small. She dropped some credits on the table for her drink and looked down at Zekron. "Humans," she said simply. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear Zekron calling her name, but she didn't stop. She pushed through the crowd, and beings twice the size of normal humanoids moved out of her way without thinking about it. As she reached the door, she heard another voice call out. "Vexithara." This voice was different, louder, more challenging. She turned to see Krexvar, a Bruthan hunter who was almost as large as she was. His species looked like walking rocks with too many teeth. He was also her biggest competitor in this sector. "I heard what you just told Zekron," Krexvar said, loud enough for half the cantina to hear. "Is it true?" "The great Vexthar is afraid to hunt humans." The cantina went quiet. This was the kind of moment that became legend in places like this. Two of the most feared hunters in the galaxy, facing off over a matter of professional pride. Vexithara could have killed Krexvar in 3 different ways before he could blink. Everyone in the room knew this, including Krexvar. "I am not afraid of humans," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the silence. "I respect them." "Respect?" Krexvar laughed, but it sounded forced. "Since when do predators respect prey? Since I learned that humans are not prey. Then what are they?" Vexthara looked around the cantina. Every being in the room was watching her, waiting for her answer. She had never explained herself to anyone before. She had never needed to. "They are something else entirely," she said finally. With that, she turned and walked out of the cantina, leaving behind a room full of confused and frightened bounty hunters. Behind her, she could hear the whispers starting. By tomorrow, the story would be all over the sector. By next week, it would reach the core worlds. Vexithara, the relentless, the hunter who never failed, was afraid to hunt humans. They would get the facts wrong, of course. They always did. But the truth was much more complicated than fear. The truth was something that most beings in the galaxy couldn't understand. The truth was that 3 years ago, Vexithara had learned that some things were too dangerous to hunt, not because they might kill you, but because they might change you. And humans were very good at changing things. Vexithara walked through the corridors of her ship, her claws clicking against the metal floor. The sound echoed in the empty halls. She preferred to work alone. Other hunters worked in teams or pairs, but she had learned long ago that partners were just another thing that could go wrong during a hunt. Her ship was called the Silent Death, and it lived up to its name. The hull was coated with materials that made it nearly invisible to most sensors. The engines ran so quietly that she could drift up to a target without them knowing she was there until it was too late. She made her way to the small room she used for planning. The walls were covered with star charts, ship schematics, and target profiles. In the center of the room was a single chair and a desk with a data terminal. She sat down and called up the file she had been trying not to think about for the past 3 hours. The file from 3 years ago. The file that had changed everything. The hologram appeared above the desk. A human male about average height for his species. Brown hair, brown eyes, no visible scars or modifications. His name was Marcus Chen, age 32, occupation listed as independent cargo hauler. The charges against him were simple: theft of medical supplies from a corporate transport. The supplies had been worth about 50,000 credits. Not a huge amount by galactic standards, but enough to make the corporation angry enough to put a bounty on his head. Vexithara had taken the job without thinking twice about it. At the time, she had hunted humans before. They were just another species to her. Weaker than most, slower than most, with no natural weapons or armor, easy targets. She had been wrong about that. The trail had led her to the Kepler mining colony in the Outer Rim. It was a small operation, barely 200 beings working the asteroid mines, the kind of place where people went when they wanted to disappear, or when they had nowhere else to go. Vexthara's ship had docked at the small port without any problems. The colony was too small to have serious security, and too poor to afford the kind of scanners that might detect her ship's modifications. She had found Chen's ship in the cargo bay. It was an old transport, the kind that independent haulers used when they couldn't afford anything better. The ship was empty, but her scanners showed that it had recently carried medical supplies. The trail from the ship led into the colony proper. Chen wasn't trying to hide. His identity card had been used at the port, at a supply store, and at a food stand. Either he was very confident or very stupid. Vexithara had followed the trail through the colony's winding corridors. The place smelled like metal and sweat and desperation. The beings who lived here were mostly miners and their families, along with the usual collection of shopkeepers and service workers that grew up around any working population. She had found Chen in a small medical clinic in the colony's lower levels. Through the window, she could see him talking to a Talarian doctor. The doctor's skin was the pale blue color that meant he was stressed or worried. Vexithara had watched for several minutes, studying her target. Chen was smaller than she had expected. Humans always looked bigger in their official photos. In person, they seemed fragile, breakable. She had waited until Chen left the clinic, then followed him through the colony's corridors. He walked quickly like someone with a purpose, not like someone who was running from something. The corridors led down deeper into the colony. The air got thicker and smelled worse. The lighting got dimmer. This was where the poorest beings lived, in spaces that had been carved out of the asteroid's rock. Chen had stopped at a large chamber that had been converted into a makeshift refugee center. Through the entrance, Vexithara could see dozens of beings huddled on blankets and sleeping mats. Most of them were Zelkari, a species she recognized from the war zones in the Outer Rim. The Zelkari were tall and thin, with gray skin and large eyes. They looked fragile even compared to humans. Their home planet had been destroyed in a corporate war 3 years ago, and most of the survivors had become refugees. Chen was moving through the chamber, carrying supplies. Medical supplies, the same ones he had stolen from the corporate transport. Vexithara had watched him for over an hour. He moved from being to being, giving them medicine, checking on the sick ones, talking quietly with the doctors who were trying to help them. She could have taken him at any time. He was completely focused on his work and had no idea she was there. One shot from her plasma rifle would have dropped him without causing any collateral damage. But she had hesitated. Something about the scene bothered her. Chen wasn't acting like a criminal. He wasn't trying to sell the medical supplies or trade them for something valuable. He was just giving them away. That didn't make sense. Vexithara had seen a lot of criminals in her career. They stole for money, for power, for revenge, or for the simple thrill of taking something that didn't belong to them. They didn't steal to give things away to strangers. She had decided to wait and see what Chen would do next. What he did next changed everything. Chen had finished distributing the medical supplies and was talking to one of the Zelkari elders. The conversation was in standard Galactic, so Vexithara could understand every word. This should last about 2 weeks, Chen was saying. Maybe 3 if you're careful with the doses. What happens after 3 weeks? The elder asked. Chen was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I'm trying to find more supplies, but it's not easy. The corporation will not send more medicine? No, they've written this colony off as unprofitable. As far as they're concerned, you don't exist anymore. The elder's large eyes got even larger. Then we will die. Not if I can help it. But you have already risked so much. If they catch you, they won't catch me, Chen said, but he didn't sound entirely sure. And if they do? Chen shrugged. Then they do. But at least some of you will live long enough for someone else to help. Vexes. Thara had felt something she hadn't felt in years. Confusion. Chen was talking about dying as if it was just another possibility to consider. Not something to fight against or run from, just something that might happen, and he was willing to accept that risk to help beings he had never met before. That was when Vexithara had realized she didn't understand humans at all. She had made her decision then. Instead of capturing Chen immediately, she would follow him. She would learn more about what he was doing and why he was doing it. It was the first time in her career that she had delayed a capture to satisfy her curiosity. It would not be the last time a human surprised her. Vexithara had followed Chen for 2 days. The human had a routine that made no sense to her. He would wake up early, check on the sick refugees, help distribute food, then spend hours trying to contact other colonies and organizations that might send help. Most of his calls went unanswered. The few that did respond told him the same thing. The Zelkari refugees were not their problem. Chen kept trying anyway. On the second day, Vexithara had watched him have a conversation with a representative from the Galactic Relief Organization. The conversation had not gone well. I understand your concern, the representative had said through the communication screen, but we have limited resources and many demands. We have to prioritize. These beings are dying, Chen had replied. The plague is spreading faster than we can treat it. Then perhaps they should consider relocating to a facility that can better serve their needs. With what money? With what transportation? They have nothing. I'm sorry, but that's not our responsibility. We can't help every group of displaced beings in the galaxy. The screen had gone dark. Chen had stared at it for a long time, then put his head in his hands. Vexithara had expected him to give up then. Any reasonable being would have realized that the situation was hopeless and moved on. She had seen it happen countless times before. Beings faced with impossible odds eventually accepted defeat and tried to save themselves, but Chen hadn't given up. Instead, he had started making plans to steal more medical supplies. Vexithara had listened to him talking with Dr. Yenth, the Talarian who ran the colony's medical center. Chen had found another corporate shipment that would pass through the system in a few days, larger than the first one with enough supplies to last the refugees for months, also much more heavily guarded. "This is insane," Dr. Yenth had told him. "The first theft was bad enough. Now you want to attack a convoy with armed escorts?" "I don't want to attack anyone," Chen had said. "I just want the medical supplies. The result will be the same. They will shoot first and ask questions later. Maybe. But if I don't try, these beings will definitely die. And if you do try, you will definitely die. Then these beings will still die and your death will have been for nothing." Chen had been quiet for a moment. "Maybe. But at least I'll know I tried everything." Dr. Yenth had studied the human for a long time. "I don't understand your species. Why do you care so much about beings you barely know?" "I don't know," Chen had said. "I just do." That conversation had convinced Vexithara that Chen was either very brave or completely insane. Possibly both. She had decided to continue following him. 3 days later, Chen had attempted his second theft. Vexithara had watched from a distance as his small ship approached the corporate convoy. The convoy consisted of 3 cargo ships and 2 escort fighters. Chen's plan had been simple. He would disable the lead cargo ship's engines with an electromagnetic pulse, dock with it, take as many medical supplies as he could carry, and escape before the escorts could react. The plan had not worked. The escorts had detected Chen's ship long before he got close enough to use the EMP. They had opened fire immediately. No warnings given. Chen's ship had been hit multiple times. His engines had failed and he had crashed on a small moon nearby. Vexithara had watched the corporate ship scan the crash site, confirm that Chen was still alive, then call for backup. That was when she had made her second decision to break protocol. Instead of waiting for the corporate security forces to arrive and arrest Chen, Vexithara had gone to the crash site herself. She had found Chen trapped in the wreckage of his ship. He was injured but conscious. When he saw her approaching, he hadn't tried to run or fight. He had just looked at her with those strange human eyes and waited. "You're the bounty hunter," he had said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "How long have you been following me?" 5 days. Chen had nodded like this made perfect sense. "Are you going to turn me in?" Vexithara had hesitated. This was the moment she should have called the corporate security forces and arranged the handover. Chen was injured and trapped. He couldn't escape. The job was essentially complete, but instead of making the call, she had asked a question. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why did you steal the medical supplies? You could have sold them for enough money to buy your own ship, your own supplies, your own life somewhere safe. Instead, you gave them away to beings who can't pay you back. Why?" Chen had thought about this for a moment. "Have you ever seen someone die from something you could have prevented?" "Yes, many times. Did it bother you?" "No." "Then I guess that's the difference between us." Before Vexithara could respond, they had both heard the sound of approaching ships. The corporate security forces had arrived. Chen had looked up at the sky, then back at Vexithara. "I have one request." "What?" "Let me send a message to Dr. Yenth. Tell him where I hid the backup medical supplies. If I'm going to prison, at least the refugees can have those." Vexithara had stared at him. Even now, facing capture and probably death, Chen was thinking about the refugees. "You're not asking me to help you escape?" "No, there's no point. Even if I got away, I couldn't get more medical supplies. At least this way, the refugees get what I already gathered." That was when Vexithara had realized that everything she thought she knew about hunting was wrong. Prey was supposed to fight for survival. Prey was supposed to put its own life above everything else. Prey was supposed to be predictable. Chen wasn't acting like prey. He was acting like something else entirely. The corporate security ships had landed nearby. Vexithara could hear armed beings moving through the wreckage, getting closer. She had made her third decision to break protocol. Instead of turning Chen over to the security forces, she had helped him send his message to Dr. Yenth. Then she had used her ship's medical systems to treat his injuries. Finally, she had hidden him in her cargo hold and told the security forces that the crash site was empty. She had lied to complete. Strangers to protect a target she was supposed to capture. She had never lied for anyone. Before, 2 hours later, when the security forces had given up their search and left the system, Vexthara had released Chen near the colony. She had expected him to thank her, or to ask why she had helped him, or to promise to stay out of trouble. Instead, he had just looked at her with those strange human eyes and said, "The refugees are in Section 7 of the colony. The medical supplies I hid are in Storage Bay 12. Dr. Yenth will know what to do with them." Then he had walked away, heading back toward the colony where corporate security might still be looking for him. Vexthara had watched him go, feeling more confused than she had ever felt in her life. She had just let a 2 million credit bounty walk away, and she wasn't even sure why. The message had come 3 weeks after Vexthara left the cantina. She was in hyperspace, traveling to a job on the other side of the sector, when her communication system chimed with an urgent priority signal. The face that appeared on her screen belonged to Guildmaster Throckvin, the head of the Galactic Bounty Hunters Guild. His species looked like someone had crossed a bear with a shark and then made it twice as large. When Throckvin was angry, smart beings found somewhere else to be. Throckvin was very angry. "Vexthara," he growled, his voice making her ship's speakers rattle. "We need to talk. I'm listening. Not over an open channel. Dock at Station 7 in the Proxima system. 1 hour." The transmission ended before she could reply. Vexthara stared at the dark screen for a moment, then changed course toward Proxima. Station 7 was a guild facility, the kind of place where bounty hunters went for official business, or where they went to be disciplined. She had a feeling this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Station 7 was a massive structure built into an asteroid. It served as headquarters for guild operations in 3 different sectors. As Vexthara's ship approached the docking bay, she counted at least 40 other hunter ships already moored. That was unusual. Station 7 normally hosted maybe 10 ships at a time. Her ship was directed to a docking bay in the station's center. As she walked through the corridors toward the Guildmaster's office, she noticed that other hunters were watching her. Some looked curious. Others looked angry. All of them looked like they were waiting for something to happen. Throckvin's office was on the station's top level. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing wanted posters, ship registrations, and tracking data from across the sector. In the center of the room was a massive desk made from the hull of a destroyed warship. Throckvin was standing behind the desk when Vexthara entered. He wasn't alone. 6 other guild officials were present, along with representatives from 3 different corporate security firms. "Sit down," Throckvin said, pointing to a chair in front of the desk. Vexthara remained standing. "I prefer to stand." It wasn't a request. She sat down. Throckvin activated a holographic display above his desk. It showed a list of names and numbers. Vexthara recognized it immediately. Her recent job history. "Impressive record," Throckvin said. 317 successful captures. 0 failures. 0 complaints from clients. Until recently. The display changed, showing a new list. This one was much shorter. "In the past 3 years, you have turned down 47 contracts, all of them involving human targets. The total value of these contracts is over 30 million credits." Vexthara said nothing. 30 million credits in lost revenue, Throckvin continued. "Do you know what kind of impact that has on guild operations? The guild takes a percentage of completed contracts. If I don't take the contracts, the guild doesn't lose anything." "Wrong." One of the corporate representatives stepped forward. She was a tall, thin woman with the pale skin and mechanical implants that marked her as coming from one of the core worlds. "When hunters refuse contracts, those contracts go to other hunters. Less experienced hunters. Hunters who fail. When hunters fail," another corporate representative added, "targets escape, evidence gets destroyed, witnesses disappear, companies lose money." "Companies that lose money," the first representative said, "stop offering bounty contracts. They hire private security instead." Throckvin leaned forward. "You're costing the guild business, Vexthara." "A lot of business. I'm following my own judgment about which jobs to take." "Your judgment?" Throckvin's voice rose. "Your judgment used to be perfect. Now you're acting like some kind of bleeding heart activist." "I'm acting like a professional hunter who chooses her targets carefully." "You're acting like a hunter who's lost her nerve." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the room, the other officials and representatives watched to see how Vexthera would respond. She stood up slowly. Are you questioning my abilities? I'm questioning your commitment to the guild. My commitment has never changed. I hunt targets. I bring them in alive. I collect my fee. You used to hunt targets. Now you run away from them. I have never run from anything. Then prove it. Throckvin activated another holographic display. This one showed a single file, a human woman with dark hair and green eyes. Sarah Mitchell, escaped corporate custody 6 months ago, suspected of sabotaging mining operations on Kepler. Prime, bears bounty 5 million. Credits. Vexthera looked at the display but didn't reach for the datapad that Throckvin held out to her. Take the contract, Throckvin said. Bring her in. Prove that you're still the hunter we thought you were. And if I refuse, then your guild membership is terminated. Your license is revoked. Your ship's registration is canceled. You become just another ex-hunter trying to make a living in the cargo trade. Vexthera stared at the holographic image of Sarah Mitchell. The woman looked young, maybe 30 years old. Her file listed her as an engineer, someone who had worked in corporate mining operations for most of her adult life, someone who probably had a very good reason for sabotaging those operations. I need time to consider this. You have 24 hours, Throckvin said. After that, the contract goes to someone else. And your guild membership goes with it? Vexthera turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, she could hear the officials and representatives talking in low voices. They sounded like beings who had already decided what she was going to do. They were wrong. 18 hours later, Vexthera sent her response to Throckvin. It was short and to the point. I decline the contract. Consider this my resignation from the guild. The response came back within minutes. Guild membership terminated. License revoked. You have 72 hours to vacate guild facilities and surrender guild-issued equipment. 3 days after that, Vexthera received another message. This one wasn't from the guild. The message was a bounty contract. The target was listed as Vexthera of Sec Prime. The charges were breach of contract, conspiracy to aid fugitives, and theft of guild property. The bounty was 10 million credits. Vexthera stared at the contract for a long time. Then she started to laugh. It was a sound that her translator couldn't quite convert, so it came out as something between a growl and a mechanical shriek. They had put a bounty on her head. The hunter had become the hunted. She was still laughing when the first attack came. 3 guild. Hunters had tracked her to a refueling station in the Outer Rim. They hadn't expected her to fight back as hard as she did. One of them was still in a medical facility on Proxima Station. The other 2 had decided that 10 million credits wasn't worth dying for, but there would be others. There were always others. Vexthera had spent the next 2 months running from hunters who used to be her colleagues. She had evaded capture 17 times, fought off 12 direct attacks, and destroyed 4 ships that had gotten too close. But she was getting tired. Her ship was damaged from the constant fighting. Her supplies were running low. Worst of all, she was running out of places to hide. That was when she made the mistake that changed everything. She had been trying to reach a hidden fuel depot in an uninhabited system when her navigation computer failed. Without accurate stellar positioning, she had been flying blind for 6 hours before she realized she was lost. When she finally found a planet, her fuel reserves were almost gone. She had no choice but to land and hope that the planet's inhabitants were friendly, or at least not immediately hostile. The planet was called Haven's Rest, and it was home to a small human colony. Vexthera's ship hit the ground hard. The landing hadn't been controlled so much as barely guided. Her engines had failed completely about 1,000 meters up, leaving her with just enough power to keep from becoming a crater. She crawled out of the wreckage expecting to die. The crash had broken 2 of her ribs and damaged her left arm. Her ship's emergency beacon was dead, her communication system was fried, and her food supplies had been scattered across half a kilometer of farmland. She was stranded on an unknown planet with no way to call for help and no way to defend herself. If the locals decided she was a threat, the first human found her. About an hour after the crash, Vexthera had managed to drag herself about 50 meters from the wreckage before the pain forced her to stop. She was lying against a tree, trying to figure out if her species' natural healing abilities would be enough to save her, when she heard footsteps approaching. The human was a woman, maybe 40 years old, with brown hair tied back and clothes that suggested she worked outdoors. She was carrying a medical kit and moving carefully, like someone who had found injured animals before. When she saw Vexithera, she stopped about 10 meters away. "You're hurt," the woman said in standard Galactic. Vexithera tried to sit up straighter, but the movement sent fire through her ribs. "Stay back. I am dangerous. Not right now, you're not." The woman took a step closer. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm a medic. Can I help you?" The name hit Vexithera like a physical blow. Chen. Like Marcus Chen, the human who had started all of this 3 years ago. "Are you related to Marcus Chen?" she asked. Dr. Chen looked surprised. "He's my brother." "How do you know Marcus?" Vexithera closed her eyes. Of all the planets in the galaxy, she had crashed on one inhabited by the family of the human who had changed her life. "I met him on Kepler mining colony," she said. "Ah." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "Then you know what kind of person he is." "Yes, I do." Dr. Chen knelt down next to Vexithera and opened her medical kit. "This might hurt. I am a sec. We are used to pain." "Good, because I need to check your ribs." For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Chen worked on Vexithera's injuries. She cleaned the wounds, set the broken ribs, and gave her something for the pain. She worked quickly and efficiently like someone who had done this many times before. "You're a bounty hunter," Dr. Chen said as she worked. "It wasn't a question. How did you know?" "The ship design. The weapons. The scars." She looked up at Vexithera's face. "Plus, Marcus told me about a sec hunter who helped him once. He said she was the most dangerous being he'd ever met." "Your brother talks too much." Dr. Chen smiled. "Yes, he does. He also said you saved his life." "I did not save anyone. I simply chose not to capture him." "Same thing, from his perspective." Dr. Chen finished with the bandages and sat back. "You can't stay here. Your injuries need time to heal, and that ship isn't going anywhere soon." "I do not expect charity." "Good, because this isn't charity. This is how we do things here. What do you mean?" "Come on, I'll show you." Dr. Chen helped Vexithera to her feet and led her away from the crash site. They walked slowly, stopping frequently so Vexithera could rest. After about 15 minutes, they reached the edge of a small town. Haven's Rest was exactly what it sounded like, a place where people went to find peace. The buildings were simple but well-maintained. The streets were clean. The people they passed looked happy and healthy. "How many humans live here?" Vexithera asked. "About 300. But we're not the only species. We have Talarians, Zelkari, a few Alterian families, even a couple of Vorthons." They reached a building near the center of town. The sign above the door read Medical Center in 6 different languages. "This is where I work," Dr. Chen said, "and where you're going to recover." Inside, the medical center was busy but calm. Vexithera saw humans treating Talarian patients, Zelkari doctors working on human injuries, and an Alterian nurse helping an elderly Vorthon with physical therapy. "I don't understand," Vexithera said. "Why are all these species working together?" "Because that's what people do here." Dr. Chen led her to a private room and helped her onto the medical bed. Haven's Rest was founded by refugees, humans who had fled the corporate wars, Zelkari who survived the destruction of their homeworld, Talarians who escaped religious persecution. We all came here looking for the same thing. What? A place where species didn't matter, where the only thing that counted was whether you were willing to help your neighbors. Over the next 3 weeks, as Vexithera recovered from her injuries, she learned more about Haven's Rest and its inhabitants. The colony operated on principles that made no sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Resources were shared freely. Work was assigned based on ability, not species. Decisions were made by consensus, with every adult having an equal voice regardless of their background. Most importantly, no one was turned away if they needed help. "It shouldn't work," Vexithera told Dr. Chen one day as they sat in the medical center's garden. "Every species in the galaxy evolved to compete for resources. Cooperation only happens when there's mutual benefit." "Maybe that's true for other species," Dr. Chen said. "But humans are different." "How?" "We're social creatures. We evolved in groups. Our survival has always depended on cooperation. All species have some level of social organization, not like humans. Other species cooperate with their own kind when it benefits them. Humans cooperate with anyone when it's the right thing to do." Vexithera thought about this. "Even when it costs them something?" "Especially then." That makes no evolutionary sense. Maybe evolution isn't the only force that shapes behavior. That conversation had happened 2 weeks ago. Since then, Vexithera had watched the colony's daily operations and tried to understand what she was seeing. Humans working 12-hour shifts to help repair a Talarian family's damaged home. Zelkari farmers sharing their crops with newcomers who had nothing to trade. Alterian engineers designing better water systems for the entire colony. Not just their own neighborhood, and always humans at the center of it, organizing, encouraging, setting an example. Your species is insane, Vexithera told Dr. Chen on her last day in the medical center. Why? You help beings who can't help you back. You risk your lives for strangers. You share resources with competitors. None of it makes sense. Does it have to make sense? Yes, everything has to make sense. The universe operates on rules. Species that ignore those rules become extinct. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something my brother told me? What? He said that when you helped him escape, you looked confused. Like you couldn't understand why you were doing it. Vexithera didn't respond. I think you helped him for the same reason we help everyone who comes here, because it was the right thing to do. I am not human. No, you're not. But maybe being human isn't about what species you belong to. Maybe it's about what you choose to do. That night, Vexithera sat on the porch of the guest house where she had been staying. Her ship was repaired and ready to leave. Her injuries were healed. She had no reason to stay on Haven's Rest, but she also had no reason to leave. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. The next morning, she found Dr. Chen at the medical center. I have a request, Vexithera said. What? I would like to stay. I would like to help protect this place, Dr. Chen smiled. Why? Because, Vexithera said, I finally understand why humans are too dangerous to hunt. And why is that? Because you don't just change the beings around you. You change the beings who hunt you. You make them want to become something better than what they were. Dr. Chen nodded. Welcome home, Vexithera. 6 months later, when the next bounty hunter tracked Vexithera to Haven's Rest, they found her working in the colony's defense force alongside humans, Talarians, Zelkari, and Alterians. The hunter had come expecting to find a desperate fugitive hiding among strangers. Instead, they found a protector surrounded by family. The hunter left without firing a shot. Word spread quickly through the bounty hunting community. Vexithera the Relentless was no longer hunting anyone. She had found something more dangerous than any target, more valuable than any bounty. She had found a home worth defending. And that, the other hunters agreed, was the most terrifying thing of all.